You guys will never believe what happened. I just turned 18 last week, and I'm staying in this artsy coastal village for the summer, chasing my dream of becoming a painter who captures the soul of the sea. My neighbor, Nathan, is this retired art curator with a quiet, magnetic vibe, think Silva, hair, piercing eyes, and a voice that could describe a canvas like it's a love story. I always wondered what he saw when he looked at me, the quiet girl next door with paint on her jeans. But yesterday, on a rainy afternoon, I overheard him on the phone saying my name and way more than I ever expected. Shocked, but smiling, I decided to confront him, not with anger, but with a whisper that changed everything. Want to know how it played out? Keep watching, because the story is all about one moment that burns brighter than the village lighthouse. Like and subscribe for more. Sarah's 18th birthday, just 6 days ago, had unlocked something bold in her, like a brushstroke of color on a blank canvas. The quaint coastal village of Tide Haven, with its cobblestone streets and salt-kissed air, was her summer escape, a place to paint and dream. Her rented studio apartment, a small space with creaky floors, was cluttered with easels, paint tubes, and the briny scent of the sea drifting through an open window. Her latest painting, a stormy seascape with wild waves, mirrored her restless energy, its hues vivid and untamed, much like her heart since turning 18. That milestone felt like permission to take risks, to chase what scared her, to see herself not just as the quiet neighbor girl, but as someone who could leave a mark. Lately, though, her thoughts kept drifting to Nathan, the retired art curator next door, whose quiet presence had become a distraction she couldn't brush away. At 65, Nathan was a former museum curator with a refined air that had caught her eye since she moved into the village a month ago. His silver hair was neatly combed, his piercing blue eyes held the depth of years spent studying art, and his hands, steady from years of handling delicate frames, moved with a quiet precision. His nice brushwork, Sarah, after seeing her first painting, paired with a thoughtful nod, had made her heart skip. She'd told herself it was just admiration for a neighbor who'd offered tips on her art, who'd shared stories of museum exhibits over tea on his porch. But her just-turned Dayton confidence fueled a curiosity she couldn't ignore, a need to know what he saw when he looked at her. Today, on a rainy afternoon, that curiosity led her to his door and to a truth she hadn't expected. The village was cloaked in a soft drizzle, the air heavy with the scent of rain and seaweed, the distant lighthouse casting a faint glow through the mist. Sarah had been sketching in her apartment when she realized she'd left her sketchbook on Nathan's porch after a late-night art chat the previous week. She grabbed her raincoat and headed next door, the cobblestones slick under her sneakers, her heart pounding with a mix of nerves and her newfound boldness. Nathan's apartment, a cozy ground-floor space in a weathered stone building, glowed warmly through its wide windows, the sound of rain tapping the glass like a soft rhythm. She knocked, but no answer came. The door was slightly ajar, and as she stepped into the entryway to call out, she heard his voice, a low, steady hum from the living room, speaking on the phone. "Sarah," he said, her name stopping her cold, her breath catching as she froze by the door. "She's remarkable. Just turned 18, but there's this fire in her work, in her. She's not just the quiet girl next door. She's got this spark, this boldness. I can't stop noticing her." His voice was warm, unguarded, each word landing like a brushstroke on her heart. Sarah's pulse raced, her cheeks flushing despite the chilly air. She should have left, should have knocked louder, but her feet wouldn't move. Her just-turned heart soaring and trembling at once. He saw her, not just the neighbor girl, but her, with all her fire and dreams. Shocked but smiling, she clutched her raincoat, her mind racing with flashes of their past weeks together, Nathan's hand guiding hers to adjust a brushstroke during an impromptu lesson. His laugh when she'd spilled paint on her jeans, the way he'd lingered on his porch to talk about her favorite artists. Each memory carried a spark she'd tried to dismiss, but now, hearing his words, the truth was undeniable. She stepped further inside the living room, a warm haven of art books, framed sketches, and a velvet armchair by a window streaked with rain. A record player spun a soft classical piece, its notes weaving through the air like a gentle tide, mingling with the scent of old paper and bergamot from a steaming teapot. Nathan stood by the window, phone to his ear, his back to her, unaware of her presence. "She's different," he continued, his voice low, thoughtful. "Her paintings, they're bold, like she's painting her soul onto the canvas. I don't know what to do with that." Sarah's heart pounded, her smile widening as she decided to act not with anger, but with the daring her 18th birthday had unleashed. She cleared her throat softly, stepping into the room, her voice a whisper but charged with mischief. "So, that's what you think of me?" Nathan spun around, his blue eyes widening, the phone slipping slightly in his hand as he ended the call with a quick, "I'll call you back." His face flushed, a mix of surprise and something warmer, his gaze locking on hers in the dim light of the room. "Sarah," he said, his voice caught between a laugh and a confession, "how long have you been standing there?" "Long enough," she teased, her voice light but trembling with boldness, her hazel eyes glinting as she stepped closer, the rain tapping the window like a heartbeat. "You didn't answer my knock, but I heard you." "Remarkable, huh? Spark?" That's a lot to say about the quiet neighbor girl. Her just-turned-date tune confidence pushed her forward, the air between them crackling with possibility. He set the phone down, his smile slow, sheepish but warm, his hands slipping into his pockets. "Caught me," he said, his voice low, resonant, like he was reading a gallery note aloud. "I meant every word, though." The room felt smaller, the classical music swelling softly, the rain's rhythm a quiet backdrop to their moment. They settled on the velvet couch, the sketchbook forgotten on a side table cluttered with art journals and a half-empty teacup. The conversation started cautious to Ethan, explaining he'd been talking to an old curator friend. Sarah admitting she'd come for her sketchbook, but it turned personal fast, the air heavy with the weight of what she'd overheard. Her mind flashed to their moments together, the first time he'd invited her to his porch to critique her seascape, his fingers brushing hers as he pointed out a shadow. A rainy afternoon when he'd shared a story of a lost Monet, his eyes lighting up as she laughed. The quiet moment when he'd said, "You've got an artist's heart, Sarah," his voice lingering in her memory like a painting she couldn't forget. "Hey guys," Sarah said, her voice bright but edged with playfulness, as if speaking to her imaginary audience, her eyes glinting with mischief as she leaned back on the couch, breaking the tension for a moment. "We're about to get into this spicy portion of the story, so please don't forget to like and subscribe." She grinned, the words a nod to her daring, but her heart pounded as she turned back to Nathan, the air buzzing with anticipation, the rain outside a soft curtain around their moment. Nathan leaned forward, his elbow brushing hers on the couch, the contact sending a spark through her like a brush hitting canvas. "So," he said, his voice low, his blue eyes searching hers with a new intensity like he was studying a masterpiece. "You heard me. Now what? You going to pretend you didn't? Or are we going to talk about it?" Her heartbeat quickened, his directness catching her off guard, like a wave crashing over her. She could laugh it off, keep things light, but her just-turned-datin heart wasn't backing down. "I'm not pretending," she said, her voice steady but soft, her eyes locked on his. "You called me remarkable. Said I've got fire. That's a lot to hear from the guy who's supposed to just be my neighbor." She leaned closer, her shoulder brushing his, the tension undeniable, the classical music a soft pulse in the background. He chuckled, his gaze steady, his fingers tapping lightly on the couch, close enough to feel their warmth. "You're remarkable, Sarah," he said, his voice warm but carrying a weight that made her pulse race. "I've been watching you paint, listening to you talk about your dreams. You just turned 18, but you've got this. presence. It's hard not to notice. His words were like a spotlight, exposing the spark she'd felt all along. Her mind raced, replaying more moments. Nathan's quiet praise when she'd shown him her first seascape, his hand steadying hers as she mixed colors. The time he'd lingered on his porch, rain-soaked, to talk about her favorite artists. The way he'd smiled when she'd confessed her fear of failing, his voice soft as he'd said, "Failure's just the first draft, Sarah." Each memory tightened the thread between them, pulling her closer to the edge of something bold and new. She swallowed, her voice unsteady but daring. "So what do you see when you look at me?" she asked, her eyes flickering to his lips before meeting his gaze again. The quiet neighbor girl, or something more? Nathan smiled was slow, knowing, his eyes tracing her face like he was memorizing a painting. "Something more," he said, his voice low, deliberate, like a curator unveiling a hidden gem. "You're not just the girl next door, Sarah. You're an artist, a dreamer, a spark I can't ignore. And I've been trying to believe me." Her breath caught, the rain tapping harder against the window, the room narrowing to just them, the couch, the music, the faint glow of the lighthouse outside. Her friend Lila's warning echoed faintly. "He's got you all starry-eyed, Sarah. Be careful." But careful wasn't what she wanted, not with her just churned daytime heart pounding like a drum. "You've been trying to ignore me?" she teased, her voice playful but pointed, her hand brushing his on the couch. The touch electric, sending a shiver through her. "Not doing a great job, Dathan." He laughed, his fingers curling slightly around hers, not pulling away, the contact warm and steady. "Guilty," he said, his voice rich with warmth, his eyes twinkling with a mix of amusement and something deeper. "But you're not making it easy showing up here with paint on your jeans, that fire in your eyes. You just turned 18, and you're already rewriting the rules." She grinned, her heart soaring, the tension a living thing between them. "Maybe I like rewriting them," she said, her voice soft but honest, her eyes locked on his, the rain's rhythm a soft heartbeat to their words. The conversation stretched on, hours melting away as the rain poured outside, the classical record looping its gentle notes. Sarah shared more than she'd planned, her fears of her paintings fading into obscurity, her excitement about her new adulthood, her dreams of exhibiting her work in galleries. Nathan listened, his eyes never leaving hers, his presence grounding her like a perfectly framed canvas. He shared too, his ears curating art, the pieces that broke his heart, the way her boldness had caught him off guard like a painting he couldn't stop studying. Every word, every glance added to the tension, a delicate dance of revelations and silences. Flashbacks deep in the moment, painting their connection in vivid hues. She remembered their first meeting when Nathan had knocked on her door to welcome her, his smile warm as he'd offered to look at her sketches. She recalled a late-night porch chat, rain drumming above, when he'd talked about a lost Picasso, his voice weaving stories that made her heart race. And the quiet moment when he'd seen her stormy seascape, his hand brushing hers as he'd said, "This is you, Sarah. All of you." Each memory was a brushstroke, building the canvas of their moment, the couch, their stage, the rain, their curtain. The night grew late, the air heavier, the tension, a constant hum. Sarah's boldness pushed her to keep going, to lean into the spark. But Nathan's words lingered, a challenge she couldn't ignore. "You didn't answer my question," she said, her voice teasing but pointed, her hand still close to his. "What do you really think of me, Nathan?" No phone call to hide behind. He leaned back, his smile slow, his eyes tracing her face like he was studying a masterpiece. "I think you're a force," he said, his voice soft but deliberate, like a curator revealing a truth. "You're bold, Sarah, bolder than you know. You walk in here just turned 18 with paint on your hands and dreams in your eyes, and I can't look away. I don't want to." Her breath caught, the room shrinking further, the rain's glow framing them like a final act. She thought of Lila's warning again, but it felt distant, drowned out by the pulse of her heart, the thrill of her new adulthood. Nathan's hand stayed near hers, the space between them charged with unspoken promise. "You're making it really hard to keep this." "Neighborly," she said, her voice a mix of teasing and truth, her hazel eyes locked on his, her just-turned Detton courage holding her steady. He laughed, his hand shifting closer, his fingers brushing hers again, the touch warm and electric. "Neighborly's overrated," he said, his voice low, rich, carrying the weight of their shared moment. "What do you want, Sarah?" "Now that you know what I think." Her heart pounded, the memory of his words echoing, the spark of his touch still warm on her skin. What did she want? Safety, simplicity, the life she knew? Or this him, the thrill, the fire he ignited in her heart? "I want to keep this," she said, her voice steady now, her eyes locked on his, her hand pressing lightly against his. "This feeling, this moment. You." His smile widened, his eyes twinkling with warmth and intensity, like a curator seeing a painting come to life. "That's a bold choice," he said, his voice soft but charged, the classical record's final notes fading into silence. "But I like bold." The room was still, the rain outside a silver curtain, reflecting their moment back to them. Nathan's hand lingered near hers, the air alive with possibility, the sketchbook forgotten on the table. "Good night, Sarah," he said, his voice soft but heavy, his eyes holding hers as he stood, offering her a way out but leaving the door open. "Good night, Nathan," she said, her voice a mix of teasing and truth. Her heart pounding as she stood, grabbing her sketchbook, the spark between them brighter than the lighthouse's beam. She stepped toward the door, her just-turned-teen heart racing, the memory of his words, his touch, lingering like a painting she couldn't finish. She walked back to her apartment, the rain cool against her skin, the village's rhythm soothing. As she closed her door, she leaned against it, her heart ablaze with the thrill of what might come next, knowing she'd stepped into his truth with a boldness that felt like the first stroke of a new masterpiece, one move at a time.